I've been around the block when it comes to analog horror. After all, it's part of my job to do so. I mean, who doesn't love a spooky and suspenseful video mimicking old found footage in a 4:3 ratio? Hell, I've even taken inspiration from the look and feel of those videos, as all of my analog horror videos are now in that ratio too, and I try to make it look like an old videotape. It really adds to the atmosphere of the videos in my opinion. But anyway, I think we've all noticed new trends and practices emerging thanks to the development of AI, and out of all places, they've made their way into analog horror. So I wanted to present the possible detriments that AI has had on the genre, or maybe even, dare I say, the positives it's had. Who knows? I'll keep that ambiguous and explain my points and what I want to bring up throughout the video. However, I do think it's a lot more complicated than just entirely bad or entirely good. Where do you draw the line in the sand regarding AI's ethics and plagiarism issues? What is so off-putting about a product with no soul? To answer that, I'll be comparing and highlighting a number of analog horror videos and series made by various creators that are confirmed to be made with AI and not, to really display and describe what I'm talking about, as well as discussing the genre as a whole and other influences. So, like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Everything I talk about will be linked in the description, and I'll also have my second channel, Soda Jump, linked there as well. Now, with all of that being said, let's dive into it. Now, the biggest use of AI in analog horror has to be Angel Engine, created by the Unearthly Hub. Just by looking at it, you can tell that all of the visuals and voiceovers are AI generated, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Lavender Town remix that plays is somehow tweaked with AI too. And it's all part of the Unearthly Hub's brand. Is it ironic that Angel Engine, a story about humanity imprisoning and utilizing an angel's infinite and holy energy to save their dying world, you know, a religious story, and religions, or in this case Christianity, believe that humans have souls, AI creations have no souls because they're machines, etc., and then the visuals and audio for that are made by AI? I don't know, seems a bit ironic to me, but despite that, I'm surprised that the AI looks the way it does. The stills that are used don't actually look too bad by themselves, mostly, but the overall consistency of the angel's appearance varies slightly. I would call that a consistency issue, and where we see a dramatic difference is when the art style is tweaked or when we cut from future to present within the story. At least, that's what looks like is happening, since the angel is warning us, the viewer, of the impending danger we humans are in as our hubris allows for the slow rise of the Antichrist. And it's interesting because the story here is pretty solid. I've talked about the angel, referenced an Antichrist, but there's other Bible references littered throughout, like the Holy Lands and a second Tower of Babel. But it begs the question of if the story was written by an AI too, because if the visuals and some or all of the audio are, then what's to stop the creator from using AI to write the story? I brought up the changing visuals since they look spooky here and then very anime at other times, which is a bit of an artistic clash, honestly. Plus, I think it's fair to say that using AI visuals will never make a case of being better than a human's, certainly not here and certainly not ever. You could argue that certain scenarios that people imagine and make using AI can be pretty interesting and funny to watch, but the people being represented, fictional or not, may never be recorded doing what you want them to do, so I guess that would be the appeal, but it can definitely be a bit of a novelty and also a giant, massively giant moral issue that could start or even escalate a conflict more than anything. I think a human could have done better here for the Angel Engine and certainly would have kept everything to a similar visual art style more easily, so no improvements to the storytelling are made in that regard. I mean, just look at this test subject for example. He looks fucked up from the experiments conducted on him, and that's conveyed really well, but as the video zooms out, the shot does that weird AI thing where it doesn't know how to keep everything in shot consistent with how it looked in the previous frames, so it tries its best and the results always vary. It doesn't really look all that consistent and takes me out of the story and world being developed. A lot of it just really kills my immersion, reminding me that everything I'm seeing is AI and soulless. And I don't really think you want people thinking that in a creative setting. Why would someone want to support something so empty feeling and that's so effortless to make? It's hard not to feel like this is some sort of gimmick driven by a trend. And I do think it is a bit of a gimmick, but I think the best application of it that I've ever seen is on Liminal Land, created by the channel of the same name. Now, if you take a look at a few stills from it, it looks like the AI slop you'd see in the early days. Considering that the series' first upload was 2 or so years ago, that checks out, but that's where things work in favor of Liminal Land. I know I'm giving AI praise here, but please don't go crazy, just hear me out, okay? In the series, people have gone missing while attending or working at the Liminal Land amusement park. The amusement park had an anomalous ride that would seemingly entice people to ride it, which would deform them beyond recognition. All of these images we see on screen are AI, but it works? This anomalous nature of the ride seems to be seeping into the whole park too, creating a narrative of a park that's alive, malicious, and the mystery runs deeper than you could ever imagine. And that's where the AI generated images for this series play into that. Look at an image like this, or like this. Like I've already said, to the naked eye, it looks like AI generated slop. But with the context of the story, we have an amusement park ride warped beyond conventional recognition, morphing the visitors that are enticed to ride or play at the park. What they feel, their joys, fears, feelings, and emotions are incomprehensible to our eyes and what the photo has captured. A lot of the park can be hard to make out too, showing us how volatile and almost alien-like the park is behaving and becoming, truly living up to its name of being liminal in the internet sort of sense. The natural is warped, and what's created is something unnatural, inhuman, and alien. I mean, after all, AI is inhuman itself, artificial and robotic. It can only mimic the natural that's come before it, the artistic practice that's been honed, passed down and evolved over centuries, created by us, by humans. People have developed it to mimic what we can do and continues to be developed and improved to mimic as efficiently as possible. Just like how a collective of humans created the Liminal Land park at first, and now it's been pulled and stretched in all types of ways by something inhuman. Or maybe it was always inhuman to begin with. That effect is being had on the recipients of the park attractions too. Surprisingly, it just works with the story and illustrations, complementing one another in that regard. I mean, you could even argue that who better to create the unnatural than something unnatural? However, is it moral? Debatable. Very debatable, considering that an AI had to use images and photos created or captured by humans to spit out these images. But then what about if someone consents for their work to be used, or doesn't? Plus, the only human input that goes into generating these images is a descriptive prompt. But the blood, sweat, and tears that go into making an art piece are lost. And arguably, what you put on your canvas, whether that's an actual canvas, a sculpture, miniature, screen, etc., is what's lost. The creation process and that satisfaction that you get from it is utterly gone. I'd argue that it's replaced with some sort of twisted gratification, instant gratification in most cases. I mean, as an example, look at my epic Dead Space inspired Death Guard. That doesn't look like it took 5 seconds to put together, does it? The amount of satisfaction I had when I varnished it and it was all finished was immense. It took me like 2 weeks on and off to do it, and I feel so accomplished. But I wouldn't feel accomplished if I just had it done within 5 seconds, now would I? It also reminds me a lot of video game cheats. I remember as a kid having an R4 for my DS and turning on cheats for games like Pokemon, and then when I played the games, I had no satisfaction or want to play them anymore. Why? Because there was nothing to build up to. All I would have are boring Pokemon battles and I would just be flying through everything. All of that learning, growth, and fun that's had when building up something is just eliminated. And the same can be definitely said here. But how did we get here? To answer that, we have to look back to the beginning of 2009. We have what is well believed to be the birth of the analog horror genre thanks to the release of a small video called No Through Road. Created by Stephen Chamberlain, the video follows 4 17-year-old boys from Hertfordshire whose bodies were found at Broomhill Farm in the car they were driving. The residence was long thought to have been abandoned, but it seems that people's thoughts have been wrong. What we see in the video is their unedited footage found on their digital camcorder. What an awesome blast from the past, and that was found in their car. The footage shows the boys stuck in a time loop of sorts, constantly passing the same road signs and then being pursued by a masked assailant with a hatchet. This video's incredible and I highly recommend watching it. There's so much planning, soul, effort, and execution that's gone into this video. It's oozing with love, personality, and charm. You can just feel it. It just has that charm that you get from early YouTube videos. There was also a small series developed from it that ran from 2011 to 2012 too, which is a pretty good watch. The analog horror tropes we all love are here too, and it really nails that found footage look and feel. And honestly, you could go back to 1999 with the Blair Witch Project, an independent American psychological film written, directed, and edited by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez to see the stepping stones and some inspirations for analog horror, especially in regards to that found footage. The next big step we really saw in the analog horror genre was 6 years later, in October of 2015, thanks to Chris Straub's Local 58. This is what really cemented the name and genre of analog horror because of the surreal, sci-fi, and psychological found footage videos of Local 58, and they were tied to a slogan: analog horror at 476 megahertz. A large, almost cult-like following spawned for the series, and it inspired countless, and I mean countless other works, which all trickles down a rabbit hole of original and inspired works to the point of where we are today. And there's a lot of history, so much so that it could get its own video at some point. Now that begs the question, can the Doomslayer beat the No, I'm only joking. What it really begs the question on is how we got to AI-generated artworks, and why they've been implemented into this genre. Well, obviously, developments in technology, right? But I think there's more to it. This seems to be a trend for any sort of hobby or passion once it gets more and more popular, especially when there's money involved. That's just how things can go when tools and ease of access are made abundant for better or worse. Video games are a great example of this for many reasons. Now that sort of discussion could turn into a shit show, but something smaller would be like iceberg videos. It's something that I have a first-hand account on since Mishkoz created his Super Mario 64 iceberg video back in June of 2020, and then a whole wave of iceberg videos on that topic and many others sprung up in response to that, and that's where I got my first big breakout on YouTube since I made my first iceberg video on that same topic. But I really tried to add more to the entries and discuss the last one. But while writing this part of the script, I actually found out that I have a Wikitubia page which, oh boy, it is barren and out of date, but it's pretty cool. I didn't even think I'd have one, and you know what? Feel free to edit it in any way you want. I think it'll be pretty funny. I'll try to keep track of it and take screenshots when I can, and then I'll show them off in a YouTube post and or video. So go crazy, have fun, enjoy. But anyway, as more and more iceberg videos emerged, the genre of video continued to grow until it slowed down to where it is now. That's fine, trends and video styles go in and out of popularity, and part of that happens thanks to saturation. There's only so many times the same video can be made numerous times before people begin to lose interest due to perhaps a lack of quality control or the same info being retold to them. It's YouTube after all. Anyone can make a video about anything as long as it doesn't violate the terms of service. Resources to make videos are abundant too, whether they're cheap or expensive, so it makes sense that the same thing happens within the analog horror genre. And it is a subgenre, so it stems from other genres, and what happens in those genres can sometimes trickle down to the other ones beneath it. It only makes sense, right? And as things get stale, people anticipate the next big thing or jump on it as soon as they can. I mean, just look at my channel and uploads for proof of that. You either go with the flow or you try to do something that really breaks the mold. And of course, with how accessible analog horror is to make and view, just like with all things, eventually other mainstream stuff will trickle into them. Let me move back to the statement of this being a trend and gimmick, since the overarching discussion of that can be linked back to the morals in one way or another. What I mean by that is this all just something people are going to goof around and tinker with for a decade and then leave it behind? The YouTuber Doodly has a great video I'll have linked in the description about the history of motion capture and how it didn't replace the jobs of animators, simply being a trend and now a tool for animators and artists to use alongside their work. There were also a lot of comparisons to AI in that video, naturally, because of how so much of the same is happening with it. Just like with AI, motion capture was mocked and pushed back against when first introduced to the film industry. I honestly had no idea because back then I was a kid becoming the king of games at school, social media wasn't really a big thing, and motion capture is still around, so I didn't think there was an issue, but it's not really used in movies, and we probably won't ever get a full motion capture movie again like The Polar Express or Monster House. Great movies, but at a glance, I think you can see why. Speaking of those movies, does anybody else have memories of sitting with family and watching Polar Express year after year on TV during the night before Christmas? Wow, they are such warm memories. When we do see motion capture now, it's used as a tool more than anything for animators and artists to use alongside their work. Off the top of my head, I've only really seen it be used for complicated movements like dancing and a lot in big budget games as of recent, but no one's been replaced because despite what out-of-touch CEOs think, you can't replace a human when making a product. There always is and always will be a human factor, no matter how big or small. Realistic movements never translated too well to cartoonish looking models, and some people thought it was soulless. There's also a trend of trying to save money on human resource costs, but what money is there to save? You can either spend millions of dollars or even billions developing technology just to get it to a point where it won't be important in the next decade, or you can just continue paying and supporting people that have passion and want to create something they can be proud of. The choice is so obvious, and even though AI is getting better, it just means we're getting closer and closer to it being pushed aside. There's so many moral and ethical issues with something like this that I'm sure it's going to be regulated at some point that'll make it limited. People already don't like it, and how it removes the soul from a product, how it's being marketed and pushed to replace humans, and how it can misrepresent people. It's really not a viable artistic choice and monetary choice to a certain extent for companies or individuals to pursue. It's just not morally sound, and as more people catch on, it'll be pushed further and further away, until it becomes nothing more than a small tool in an artist's arsenal of many. But this could all just be a big scare that they'll replace humans and then they get solidified as tools for human work. But I don't blame people for being worried or scared, because as we've stated before, jobs are being put on the line, and morals and ethics that should be considered in any field of work or hobbies need to be considered here as well. In regards to analog horror, we've seen what AI has been able to make with Angel Engine and Liminal Land in the form of the characters, some or all of the audio, and some of the places we see. I'm pretty sure that Liminal Land has some 3D modeling work in it, but I could be wrong about that. Either way, what's been made has an interesting story and is weirdly thematic and ironic with what's been created. I guess you could say the same for Angel Engine as well. However, that look and human-crafted feeling is lacking, and that takes a lot from it. Much more than motion capture could ever do, because at the very least, the movements, models, and voices are made by humans. How can you even dare to think of replacing the greatness and standards created by so many other people by something so inhuman in any field? It's impossible. Humans and the soul are irreplaceable despite what some questionable people will have you believe. AI will be nothing but a gimmick and trend until that fades away. At least I and many others think so. AI can only take itself so far after all. There are moral and ethical issues among other things that hold it back from being great or even exceeding something a human could ever make. And that's just the not so black and white reality of it. Do you feel the same? Do you feel differently? Let everyone know in the comments section because, oh boy, AI really does spark some debates and yelling matches. I can't even point out something made by AI without people getting upset, so I wonder what this video's reception and comments are gonna be like. Anyway, like, subscribe, and check out my second channel Soda Jump if you want to see more from me. And as always, we can't forget the shoutouts to my lovely patrons and YouTube members, and a big shout out to the highest tier Patreon members, Joel Matthew Colgrove and La Critura. Thank you both for your continued contributions, and thank you to everyone else too. You guys are absolute legends. Stay tuned for more content like this. Everything talked about will be in the description if you want to further look into them, and I'll catch ya in the next one.